It is a pleasure to meet all of you, even though I'm up on stage and you're out there. It is great. By all means, please come and talk to me. I'm going to be here for over the next 2 days. Because most of the time when I meet people for the first time, it's during a time of crisis. They're having their worst day of their, career. And that's when I get to meet them. I get to come in and try and figure out what's going on, what they're doing. I try and get to figure out how they operate. I always tell people, if you don't have a relationship with us at CISA before we come on site, you have to send somebody, one of your responders has to babysit us to bring us up to speed on how you operate, what you're trying to protect, how you're trying to protect it while you're in the middle of a crisis. And I'm going to kind of walk through that a little bit with what happened with Colonial Pipeline and talk to you about a couple of other things that happened through there. So how many of you have heard of CISA before? It's a lot more hands every time I ask that question. We are a relatively new agency, so we're only 4 years old. I know we look good for our age, We used to be part of the headquarters element of the Department of Homeland Security, and then Congress took a look at our mission and said, this is more important than just having this to be some special mission from the director of DHS. This needs its own budget, it needs its own crew, it needs some stability to the organization. And so they made us our own agency. We're a 3-letter agency with 4 letters, so we're not good at math. But we are the nation's risk managers. We are here to protect the federal network. So everything that's got a .gov to it, that is our domain. That is what we're trying to protect. But then we also have that second mission, which is infrastructure resiliency. 80% of critical infrastructure is not owned or operated by the federal government. It's owned and operated by private industry, state and local governments. So how do you ensure cybersecurity, ensure resiliency of something that you have no control over? Well, you can either regulate it, or you can voluntarily teach them how to do it. So we looked at things and we said, believe it or not, the federal government hates to do regulations. They're slow to change, they usually impede agility for an organization, and they don't really stay up with the current threats. And so we chose the voluntary program, which is where we created what's called, originally it was the Protective Security Advisor Program, and they taught you guards, gates, guns. They did physical security. But then about 7 years ago, critical infrastructure said, hey, we think we got the physical security thing down. We really want to know about cybersecurity. That's where the new threats are coming. So they created us the Cybersecurity Advisor Program. We are there to help teach people how to do cybersecurity. We are there to help you with the hurdles that you're trying to do. We are a no-cost resource for you to call and just give you advice to work through things. And I'll get all to that at the end. But we're also here for emergency communication. So that's one of the new elements that we've brought on board is we are here for emergency communication. So whether it be a natural disaster, hurricane, those type of events, or a cyber attack, we're there to ensure communications are happening. So I am part of Region 4. So we follow the FEMA region models. So CISA has the same 10 regions that FEMA has. I am a cybersecurity advisor for Region 4. I was the first cybersecurity advisor for Region 4, so I built the program down here. They told me 20% travel when I took the job. I cover 8 states. I was on the road about 95% of the time, a one-man army. So I did that for 5 years before they got me help, and Jason came on board. Now we're up to 10 of us in the region, and we'll be up to 20 by the end of the year. So we actually now have cybersecurity coordinators, which are state-specific. So we have one person for Georgia, one person for Florida, one person for Tennessee, so on and so forth. So we continue to build because the program has become very good to the people that it supports. Here's those 16 sectors. How many of you have seen this slide before, seen the 16 sectors? Yeah. How many of you know which sectors are important to you? How many of you know which sectors you're part of? Yeah, a lot fewer hands there, but I'm glad to see some hands. Because a lot of times I go into organizations, when I do assessments with them, that's one of the first questions I ask you is, which one of these do you rely on? If there's an outage in one of these, which one impacts you on your day-to-day operations? And they don't know. They don't know the threats that are to their supply chain. That's what we're going to talk about today. They don't understand what we call the cascading effect or the domino effect of cyber outages. So my dad is my hero. He's one of my role models. And my dad used to always tell me it's the little things that matter. He preached this his entire life. I could tell you stories all day long about my dad. But this is one of the things he used to teach me when I was a little kid. He loved this, and it's been attributed to lots of leaders throughout history, and that's for want of a nail, the shoe was lost. And I'm sure you've seen all of this, and that all the way down to you lose the kingdom all because you needed that one little thing. Well, I took a look at this and I decided it needed an update. Because it's no longer about the nail, it's about the data. And without data, we can't do anything. If we don't have data in those assets and we lose the asset, we lose the process. Without the process, we can't support the system. Without the system, there's no operations. Without operations, we can't provide a service. And without a service, we no longer have a mission. All because we have the data. Data is king. Data is currency. Data is what it's all about. It's what the bad guys want. It's what we want to protect. How many of you truly know what your crown jewels are in your organization? What are you really trying to protect? Sometimes that gets lost in translation. I go into a bank, I love walking into like just a branch of a bank, and I'll walk up to the teller and I'll be like, what's the most important thing that your bank does? And they're like, oh, commercial banking is the most important, because that's the customers they're interacting with. Then I go up to the CEO of the bank, I say, what's the most important thing that you do? And they're like, oh, business loans, that's where all of our money comes from. Everybody's on the ground floor, the operational level, is all trying to protect commercial banking, and yet the bigwigs think 90% of our revenue comes from business loans. There's this disconnect, and that's in every business I go into. The people on the floor are protecting something different than what the CEO or the C-suite really wants to protect. Do you know where you fit into that mission? Because that's what we're looking at, is you have a mission. How many of you have a mission, vision, and value statement for your organization? How many of you, I pointed you right now, you could recite that to me for your organization? Anybody? It was funny because I went and did an assessment with an organization. I did an assessment with the county, and in the middle of the assessment, I was, one of the questions that we start talking to them about is, hey, do you have a mission, vision, and values? And they were like, yeah, our values are this. And I was like, that's a really great value. And they sat there and they started thinking about it, and they're like, do you mind if we pause this assessment? We need to go and have a special meeting real quick. And I said, okay. They were gone for about an hour, and they came back, and I was like, do you mind me asking what you were doing? They're like, we realized when you made us repeat our value statement that we had just made a decision that morning that we were going to allow a certain company to come and operate in our county, and that goes against our values and our vision. Our vision or value for this county is we're a great place to raise a family. And if we allow that company to come in, we're no longer going to be a great place to raise a family. We're going to start to become a business-oriented county. And that's not what our vision or value for. And sometimes we lose sight of that. But that's what we're making business decisions on, is those values, that vision, and that mission. And it has to trickle all the way down to the bottom. Because believe it or not, cybersecurity is the foundation to everything that we do. How many of you know why we use the term cyber now? Anybody? Is it just a buzzword? When I started off in this industry over 22 years ago, I was a computer security specialist. Then I was a network security specialist because I was doing more than just securing a computer. Then I was an information security specialist. Then I was an information assurance specialist because I was doing more than securing, I was assuring that information was getting someplace. But then we came up with this term cyber. This is not just a buzzword, it actually has meaning. Just like all those other transformations, cyber is the integration of IT and OT, because we're no longer just protecting IT systems, we're now protecting operational technology and the Internet of Things. Our scope of protection has to be bigger than it ever was before. We've moved from a single computer, from the network, we've moved from just mainframes to now protecting everything that's connected. And it's all connected because we've built a world of convenience. We've built a world in which you can operate your TV with your phone or with your voice. If I said, hey Siri right now, how many phones are going to go off? Anybody? We've built a world that's always on, we've got this great interconnected world. We have Nest thermostats, we've got Ring doorbells, we've got Xboxes, we've got phones, we've got tablets, we've got camera systems. How many of you allow your employees to work from home? How many of you trust their home networks are secure? Do you think the bad guys know that they can attack somebody's home network to get onto their home and wait for them to put their work PC on there and then jump to their work PC and then use that nice VPN connection to get all the way back to your network? They're targeting people now. We live in a world of convenience in which our building is automated. Badge access systems, camera systems, elevators, escalators. We've got transportation systems that have more technology. You can no longer go and work on your car with just a screwdriver and a winch and a socket set. You almost need a computer degree to work on a car anymore. We have production systems, which all of you are familiar with all of this. I'm preaching to the choir here. Think about healthcare. Think about, when you used to have an x-ray, somebody had to be down at the x-ray machine, they took the results, they ran them all the way back up to the nurse's station, the nurse ran them over to the doctor, but it's all interconnected now. It all sends that digitally. Imagine a ransomware actor hitting a hospital with ransomware and it hits their life support system. Is that a different decision to make than it just hits their accounting system? Have you thought about all the different things that a ransomware can hit today? All the different ways in which our data is being used. Data to support our life, data to keep things convenient, or data for national security. Because believe it or not, critical infrastructure is now national security. Because the bad guys want it. How many of you are familiar with a little thing called, Russia, Ukraine right now? Or China, Taiwan? Those threat actors want to get into our networks to make us stay neutral or make us stay out of it as much as possible. If they say, hey, we're going to shut down your power grid if you don't stay, they're using our IT, our OT, our technology as a bargaining chip in global affairs. Every country wants to be there. Every country wants to do it. Every country wants to be an advanced, persistent threat in your network. But we're going to talk about the domino effect. Some might call it the shock wave, the ripple effect, butterfly effect. My personal favorite is the cascading parade of failure. How many of you ever had one of those days where just one thing goes wrong and then something else goes wrong and something else goes wrong? I love stories, so I'm going to tell you a quick story. It's actually happened here in Orlando. One of the first times I traveled down here, I got a rental car. And of course, the speaking engagement I had ran long. I needed to make my flight. So I jump into my rental car, and of course you have to gas the rental car up before you return it, right? Because the federal government, they don't allow us to prepay for anything. We always have to take the long route everywhere. So there I am in my rental car. It starts to rain. I mean, it's Florida. It's one of those quick rain showers that hits and it comes down in buckets. I'm in a car I've never driven before. Do you think I stopped before I got into the car when I first got it to say, where are the windshield wipers? No, here I am on a busy, highway. I have no idea where my windshield wipers are. I can't see out of the front of my car. I'm, lucky that there's taillights on everything in front of me, so I could find every little switch until I found that. So that was one thing that went wrong. So then I pull over into the gas station as quick as I can, try and figure this out. I'm like, I might as well gas up while I'm here. I don't know how to open the gas can. I get out of the car. It's one of those ones that's all sealed. So I look in the car. Usually there's a button or something. There's no button. So I say, okay, there's a glove box. Open the glove box, there's a user's manual. I start flipping through the user's manual. The user's manual says there's a lever. I look down, there's no lever. So I do what all guys do, is I stand there and I look at it, hoping to summon other guys. And of course, another guy comes to my aid and he goes, oh, let me help you. We can figure this out. And after a moment, we're both standing there doing the summoning pose. And his wife finally comes over and she goes, have you tried Googling it? And I'm like, that's like stopping to ask for directions. So we Google it, and Google shows us exactly where that lever is supposed to be, only it's not there in this car. So I'm like, okay, time is ticking away. I was already late to get on my flight to begin with, so now I'm like, got no time. So I just say, okay, I'm not going to gas up. Get to the place to turn it in. They're like, hey, you can't turn it in like this. We're going to have to charge you a lot of money. And I know I'm going to have to eat that out of pocket because the federal government has very strict rules on that. I'm like, look, if you can find the gas thing, and he starts looking, he doesn't know where it's at either. So he Googles it. He gets his manager to come over. They both Google it. I'm like, look, I'm really late for my flight. They move the floor mat over, and the person who drove the car before me must have broken off the gas lever. There's a hole in the floor. You have to stick your finger in the hole and push a little button in there, and that's how you open the gas can. That was not the time I wanted to find that out, though, and that's what I'm getting to. Times of crisis are not when you want to be trying to figure out how your car operates. So, what the bad guys are going after is this whole process, is they want to hit a technology asset. They want to make that unusable to you. And that's going to cause your operations to go down, which is going to lose you your service, which is going to lose you your mission. This is what we're looking at. So I want to talk a little bit about Colonial Pipeline. That's what the analogy I want to use today is that. But we can't just look at Colonial Pipeline as this is it. You have to kind of set the stage. You have to say what was going on that caused this to be the problem that it was. You have to say that the dependency on the pipeline over the last 10 years has become more and more because refineries were closing down. We had a lot of hurricanes that were actually impacting the refineries. The Keystone Pipeline was halted, which doesn't seem like a big deal because that's north. Why does that impact us in the south? Well, because when they halted that pipeline, guess where all of our hazardous material drivers went? North, to drive the pipeline, to keep all that fuel flowing down. But they had to do it by truck now. So, which might cause a hazmat driver shortage here in the southeast. And we had COVID. COVID also made all those hazardous material drivers, they're like, hey, I'm making X amount of dollars, but if, Amazon and all these other places, FedEx, are going to pay me more to drive stuff that's not hazardous. Shouldn't I do that? Because guess what we all did during COVID? We all ordered things online. Everything was shipped. So we had a driver shortage overall. And then we have this integration of IT and OT. So that sets the stage for what we're looking at here. Because the pipeline is 5,500 miles of pipeline. And it is delivering home heating oil, aviation fuel, and gasoline. Now, when I say gasoline, this is what the public heard too, so we're going to talk about that a little bit too. But it's not gasoline that we think about for like cars and things like that. It's different types of gas. So on May 7th, 2021, DarkSide hit them with ransomware. How many of you knew that 100 gigs of data was stolen as part of that ransomware attack? Couple of hands. That probably had more to do with them paying the ransom than anything else because they threatened to release that data publicly. How many of you are in regulated industries? If I said I had 100 gigs of your data pulled directly from your systems, do you think you might start to sweat a little bit? Especially if your regulators got a hold of that 100 gigs of data? No, nobody's doing anything bad. All right. The ransom that they asked for was $4.4 million. And I love this quote. I put this quote up there because I want to show this to you. I didn't make it lightly. I'll admit that I wasn't comfortable seeing money go out the door to people like this, but it was the right thing to do for the country. For the country. How many of you think that in a time of crisis, you're going to be able to make the decision to pay or not pay based solely on your internal policies? How many of you are going to be getting your partners, your customers, or other people external to you, maybe even the nation itself, prodding you and poking you, saying, get back online as fast as possible, you're causing a problem? I think that Colonial Pipeline, if they didn't have all those people from the outside yelling at them or trying to poke or prod them, might have made a different decision. Maybe they wouldn't have. But the key thing here is that when he says for the country, that means that somebody else was helping him make a decision or pushing them toward the decision that they needed to make. But let's look at this a little bit more. April 29th is when the actual compromise occurred. May 7th is when it actually detonated. That's about 10 days. What could you do in 10 days with full access to a network? They didn't know what happened over those 10 days. They had no idea what the threat actor had done in their environment before they detonated the malware. They had to figure that out. They have two teams going, one trying to fix the problem, the other trying to figure out, is that really the only problem? Ransomware might not have been their biggest problem. They had no idea if the threat actor had done anything to any of the safety systems, to any of the payment systems. They had to try and figure all this out while they only had limited data because most of it was encrypted. But they got in through a compromised VPN password from an employee that no longer worked there. So most organizations have a way to get rid of, authentication and access control when an employee is terminated or moved or transferred to everything that, hits the main system. But they had a separate VPN login, and nobody bothered to delete them from there. The bigger problem was this particular user used the same password for his VPN that he used for his Gmail account. His Gmail account had been compromised sometime earlier, and the threat actors literally, to what we can figure out, literally said, let's try this password that was compromised to this user's at his place of employment on everything that might be there, and boom, they got in. There was no indicator because it was a legitimate logon. It was the actual password. How many of you would have raised any flags in your organization, somebody logging in with their actual password? Yeah. Multi-factor authentication was not used, so there was no, there was nothing else to protect them there. I have a kind of a funny story. I want to get off tangent just a little bit. I was doing an organization recently, and they were touting their multi-factor authentication program. And they say, yeah, we love it, but it also doesn't work. Because they use this thing where their phone, they have, anytime their account is being logged onto, it'll send a notification to their phone, and they have to acknowledge that, yes, they're trying to log in. So they were hit with ransomware, and they tracked it back to one of their physical security guys, saying, okay, your account was compromised. What happened? He's like, I don't know how I got it compromised. So they cleaned everything up. 2 weeks later, they get hit again, and it was the same guy. And they're like, what's going on? We have two-factor authentication. How does your account keep getting compromised? He's like, I don't know. Every time the little thing pops up, I hit OK. They're like, at 2 o'clock in the morning, he goes, yeah, it goes off. I just go, yeah, okay, log in. I don't care. So with Colonial Pipeline, this is that cascading effect we're talking about. Colonial Pipeline is a transportation system. So it transports fuel. And so they couldn't deliver energy, which is what they're delivering. So the energy industry was hit. And because the energy industry couldn't get their energy where they needed to go, the transportation system was hit again. This time airports, airplanes, things like that, which caused emergency services, and we'll get to why in just a moment on that one. But we couldn't during the start of hurricane season, we suddenly had people saying, hey, we don't know if we have enough gas for our emergency services vehicles, which started to impact healthcare and public health. We had to pull drivers away from the chemical and the critical manufacturing places in order to get fuel starting to be delivered on time. So we had to pull away resources from other industries. So these are all those other places that got impacted because one place got hit with ransomware. And I could keep following this rabbit down that hole until all 16 sectors are actually impacted. All from one event, one small event from one VPN password. Because what you had happen here is because we live in an on-demand society, airports no longer hold weeks and weeks worth of fuel on site. Those containers are, an environmental hazard. They're very costly. They keep enough fuel for a couple of days, and that's about it, because the pipeline is delivering them fuel on demand. And so without that demand, suddenly they couldn't put a nonstop flight from Atlanta to Hawaii. They had to divert it to Los Angeles to get refueled so that they could go on to Hawaii or Seattle or someplace like that. Well, those airports didn't have the capacity to handle that either, because most airports were already running at max. And so we're diverting all of these, planes all across. And think about every airport in the Southeast was having this problem because they're all getting their fuel directly from the pipeline. And then you had to divert the hazardous material drivers. You actually had to take them away from other industries because there was already a shortage here in the Southeast, and you had to get them from somewhere. And so you're impacting other critical infrastructure. And then when it goes public, even though it's not actually delivering gasoline for your car, the panic buying started happening because the public says, oh, gas is going to start being scarce. Let's all run out and get our gas. They started putting it in, whatever they could find. There were lots of car fires. We actually had lots of emergency service issues because people were passing out because of the fumes in their own car, because of the things that they were taking. This actually, the bottom bullet there, is that the Product Safety Commission had to actually send out a special advisory on what to put fuel into because so many people were doing this. So Georgia declared a state of emergency that temporarily waived the collection of state taxes on fuel, transportation of fuel across state lines and stuff like that. Things are bad when a state says, hey, we won't collect any money on this, So this is what we're looking at. One incident caused all of this to happen. And some of it we could say, yeah, we could prepare for that. We couldn't really think about the panic buying. The public is going to interpret things however they want to interpret it. The news is going to put it out there. People are going to make their own decisions, and that causes a whole different slew of problems. And as part of your own incident response plan, you need to think, hey, let's think like the public for a second. That might change the way that you kind of look at things. Because think about your own supply chain. If you didn't have parts of your supply chain, does that impact your deadlines? Will it impact your reputations? Could you make your deliveries or your schedules? What about the quality of your product? How many of you, I mean, let's not take Colonial Pipeline aside, let's talk about COVID. How many of you were hit by the chip shortage? Suddenly you couldn't get parts in. It was hard to find replacement parts. All those fun things. What about all those containers sitting off the coast because we were worried about COVID coming in on the containers, They were stacking them up out in the ocean. Think about just how easy it is to cause this cascading effect. That one little thing can cause such an outage across so many different critical infrastructures. Because we all have a supply chain. We all depend on somebody else at this point in time. There's no longer, I'm going to defend my castle, and this is where I stand. Because our castle now is so many other people's castles as well. We have to change information. We're all interconnected. We're all in this together. And if we're not sharing information with each other, if we're not helping each other, then we're really doing a disservice to ourselves and to all the people we support. Look at some of these supply chain attacks over the last couple of years, I guess 10 years at this point. How many of you knew that Target was hit through their HVAC system? Yeah. How many of you would be prepared to be hit through your HVAC system? When I did pen testing, that was my favorite system to go through. Nobody protects their HVAC system. At least not back when I was doing it. But the funny thing about Target is that the HVAC company actually saw what was going on, and they alerted Target to what was going on. But the person who got those alerts at Target was on vacation, and there was no alternate or backup for them, so they just kept stacking up. And the HVAC company was trying to say, I think something's going on here, and then it became a really big problem. One of my favorites is the Paradise Papers. Anybody familiar with the Paradise Papers? So this group of threat actors decided that, hey, you know what, we'd really like some patent information. We'd like to know about some financial disclosure information. We'd like to know about mergers, acquisitions. But all the companies we want that information from, they all have pretty good cybersecurity programs, right? You're going to protect that stuff, right? Well, what do you need to do with all that stuff in order to make it a reality? You have to go through the legal system, right? Who doesn't have good cybersecurity? Lawyers. At least at the time they didn't. Hopefully they've changed a little bit. All that exact same information that these companies were paying millions of dollars to protect, their lawyers had it on their networks in order to process it for them. No protections at all. So the threat actors hit the law firms and stole all that data. Posted a lot of it online, showed where certain European companies were offshoring their money, how they're doing mergers and acquisitions. A lot of illegal stuff was really thrown out there in the face of everything. Really fascinating thing there, how much of your data, do you really know where your critical data is? Maybe on your network you do, but who are you sharing it with? Who has a copy of it? Who utilizes that same stuff? Domino's Pizza in Australia is one of my favorite ones here. So Domino's Pizza wanted to get into the online ordering business. Everybody wants to do that, right? It's the wave of the future. So they found a company that would do all that for them. They put the website up. They did all the, take the credit card information, set everything up, and it was great. But Domino's kind of outgrew them very quickly, saying, hey, people are really doing this online ordering thing, so they had to go with a bigger company. So they, transitioned from company A to company B. And of course, company A did the right thing, deleted all of their data off, and everybody lived happily ever after, right? Well, no, company A said, hey, Domino's Pizza might want this data someday in the future or might come back and do business with us, so we're going to hold on to it. They got hacked. All that data was stolen. Guess who is held liable? Domino's Pizza, because the customers gave that data to Domino's. So Domino's was held liable for that breach. Even though Domino's no longer did business with that company, they were held liable for the information because it was them that the customer was giving it to. Do you really know where your data is? Do you have a transition plan? Do you account for making sure, do you have a way to make sure that people are actually deleting your data or getting rid of data they no longer need? Another funny story, and this is off my own personal adventures. How many of you ever question what data is needed for you to do anything? I went to get a new dentist about a year ago. And I go into the dentist office, they're like, hey, we need your complete medical history, we need your social security number, and blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, yeah, you're not getting any of that. Like, well, we need it. And I was like, why do you need it? Like, well, if we ever do surgery on you, I was like, if. I was like, when you go to do surgery on me, I'll make sure you have the history that you need to know. I can work with my doctor on that. They're like, well, we really need all this stuff here to verify who you are. And I was like, my insurance company will validate I am who I say I am. You can work through them on that. And they're like, well, we really want this data. And I was like, okay, tell me how you're going to protect that data. Like, oh, we have a company. I was like, okay, show me how they're going to protect the data. Like, well, we don't really know. I was like, well, then I'm not comfortable giving it to you. And they're like, well, then you can't be our patient. And I said, okay, well, I'm sorry I wasted your time. Thank you, goodbye. I started to walk out, and the dentist comes out and says, what's going on? And I was like, oh, they're asking me for all this information. And he looks at him, he's like, why are you asking for that information? They're like, well, because we always get that information. He's like, well, we don't need it right now. I mean, if we ever need it, we can get it from him. And I said, okay, then I'll be your patient. Do you ever question why somebody needs your data? My sons give their data out to anybody who asks. That's the generation. I mean, the generation that we're looking at, replacing us, they really don't value privacy at all. They'll put anything on TikTok. I used to tell people when I did pen testing, one of the favorite things I do is I just take a folding table, sit it out in front of the organization I was trying to pen test, put a black, tablecloth on it, put a bag of pens on the side, and I would say, ask people, hey, I'll give you a free pen if you tell me what your password is. We're doing a cybersecurity test here to see if you're actually using very secure passwords. And people would give me their password for a free pen. And when we asked them later on, why'd you give it to us? They're like, well, we didn't think you could do anything with just the password. We thought you needed a username. I was like, do you know how easy it is for me to find a username? I was like, because most of you came with your badge on your, wearing your badge. I just took a picture of your badge while you were getting your pen. I had your username. I was like, you could have given me a fake password, but you all gave me your real password. They're like, well, we wanted to know if it was actually a secure password too. I was like, well, no, it's not anymore. One of the other the phishing things I love to do, I used to tell people all the time, is my favorite phishing thing is I'd send an email out to everybody in the organization and say, hey, we want to thank everybody for a great year that we've had. We're going to have Food Truck Friday. And we're going to bring food trucks in. We know there's a lot of people here, so if you want to order early, click here. 80% click rate on that because everybody wants Food Truck Friday and everybody doesn't want to wait in line for it. It's that easy. And with the way that the world works today is that we can find out as much about a person as we want. I always say that Amazon knows more about my wife than I do. And that's not for lack of trying. She just trusts Amazon more than she trusts me. But think about all the information that we share. I can go to your company's website to see that you're having a picnic this weekend. I can craft an email that looks exactly, people are going to click on it because they're expecting information about the picnic. I can figure out, if people want to hit me with, a targeted email, they're going to send something like, hey, Klint, this is what the Steelers are doing with their quarterback situation. I'm probably going to click on that link, But think about all the different ways I wish social media existed when I did pen testing. I would have been king. There would have been no organization. Of course, I got into most organizations anyway. But think about everything out there. I used to use people's job postings to find out, is this a Linux shop? Is this a Windows shop? Do they use Apples here? I can look at their job postings and find out exactly what technology they're using because they're usually putting it right there. I know what toolkits to bring. I know how to attack an organization from a job posting. I actually used to go and interview, pretend to be a candidate just to interview with the company so I could find out more about the organization that I was about to hit. How much information do we give away for free? How easy do we make it for the threat actors to come after us? You've probably seen this chart before here, is that most people are really good at the two ends of this chart, is they know that they have a problem and they know how to recover from a disaster. It's everything in the middle there that it gets a little fuzzy, which usually means that most organizations notice they have a problem, they wait for it to become a disaster before they know what to do about it. That's an issue. Most organizations I go in, I ask them a simple question. Do you know the difference between an event and an incident? And they're like, well, no. I'm like, well, if I lock my, account out because I fat-fingered my password 3 times, is that an event or an incident? Oh, that's just an event. We wouldn't do anything about that. I was like, yeah, your password reset policy will probably take care of that. But what if I locked my account out on every computer in the organization all at the same time, something that's not humanly possible? Is that an event or an incident? That makes them think. Wouldn't you want to know the root cause of how I did that or why it happened? You've got to have some definition in your organization. What are events? What are incidents? When are you going to say additional resources needed to come in to take care of something so that you can continue business so you never have to recover from a disaster? Because that's what this chart looks like here. Most organizations know they have assets they want to protect. They put some controls around to protect them, but they don't know how to detect when something bad is happening. Is Mary logging in at 2 o'clock in the morning something you want to investigate? I don't know. What's Mary's real shift? Does Mary sometimes work at 2 a.m.? And how would you respond? Do you have responses ready to go? Do you have a ransomware response? Do you have a malware response? Do you have an insider threat response? Because that's the thing, is most organizations, they think that they have a one-size-fits-all response plan. But I can tell you, if you were looking at an embezzling case, that's a different response because you want forensics on that. You want something you can put in a court of law to prosecute the person who's embezzling you, right? You're not really worried about you prosecuting the person who did malware against you. You're going to let the federal government handle that. You want to get back up and operational. Different types of responses call for different actions. Are you prepared for that? And then how do you recover? I'm going to take a sip of my water here real quick. My name is Klint Walker. I'm with the federal government, and I'm here to help. We are CISA. We are a free resource. I can't say free. I take that back. We are an already paid for service. Your taxpayer dollars have already paid for us. We are here to support you. Most people don't even know that we exist or that we have these services, but we operate in all these different categories. On the bottom over there, you'll see that we have cybersecurity advisors. Like I said, it's not just me anymore. There's a whole team of us out there. Please contact us. Let us come into your organization, start to work with you, figure out how you operate. Let us show you what we can do. Let us help you partner up with other organizations. You know, we have protected security advisors, guards, gates, guns. I know that mass shootings are all the rage in the news right now, and there's a lot of them happening, so make sure that you're protected as well on that. But we do offer remote assistance. Colonial Pipeline called us immediately when they got hit. We were right there with them through most of it, trying to help them out, doing the best we could, until their lawyers got involved and they kicked us out. But that's a whole other discussion topic around that. But we can do malware analysis along with you. We can help with hunt or incident coordination. Your cybersecurity advisor can assist you during all that. If it's ransomware that you've been hit with, I'm going to tell you right now, there's not a whole lot we can do with ransomware. Once it detonates, it's detonated. It's your processes and procedures that need to get you through that. But we can be that shoulder to cry on if you need us to. Or, you know, what a lot of organizations use me for is to help them notify their supply chain that something's going on and to help their supply chain protect themselves. Or we come in and maybe help them find patient zero. How did the bad guys get in initially? So there's still a lot that we can do there, but we really can't help you with ransomware, unfortunately. We prefer to act on the left-hand side of the screen there, preparedness. How many of you do tabletop exercises? How many of you know that you can call me in to facilitate your tabletop exercise, to come up with scenarios, to walk you through, do all of that stuff? I will be happy. We will do a tabletop exercise with just your OT team, with just your IT team, with your entire organization. We can do an OT or an exercise with your supply chain. Invite your cloud services in, invite your vendors and suppliers to exercise with you, your infrastructure providers, your power, water, whatever you need. We can help bring those players to the table. We can bring the FBI into exercise with you if that's what you want. Secret Service, whoever you need, we can get them there. We also offer threat indicators. How many of you have signed up for all of our US CERT threat indicators? If you haven't, please do so, especially visit Shields Up webpage to see what's going on with the Russia-Ukraine stuff. But one of the biggest things that we do is we do assessments. There's no cost for any of these assessments. The top 3 there are strategic assessments. These are things that are going to help you figure out your 1-year, 3-year, and 5-year plan. These are assessments where I come on site. They're going to look at your policies, processes, and procedures. How do you actually operate your cyber program? How do you operate both your IT program, your OT program? How do they come together? The technical ones, or the tactical ones as I like to call them, are the bottom ones. We can do a phishing campaign against your organization. We can do vulnerability scanning. If you don't sign up for anything else, the vulnerability scanning, please sign up for that. Any of your external facing IPs, we will scan them on a regular basis and send you a report to show you how vulnerable you are. We'll do trending and analysis for you. If we scanned and found 100 IP or 100 devices on your IP range the first time we scanned you, and then we find 105 the second time, we're going to say, hey, here's 10 new devices that we found, and here's 5 devices that disappeared from your last scan. We're going to start helping you know what you look like to the bad guys. We can do validated architecture design review. Best acronym in the government, the VADER. How many watching Obi-Wan Kenobi? Anybody? Is it just me? All right. So the Vader is where it's like a simulated pen test where we look especially at your OT, IT convergence and we start to say, is this the best architecture for that? What are you trying to do operationally? Do you have single points of failure, bottlenecks, things like that? Is there a better way to do this? How is your security stack looking at this particular convergence points? This is a fantastic service and it's something that we reserve especially for industrial control system or OT users. And then of course we offer risk and vulnerability assessments, otherwise known as penetration tests. We have two flavors of pen test. We have a remote pen test, which is very easy to get, which is where we just hit you, it's a vertical, we just hit you from the outside. Can somebody get in from the outside to your environment? Yes or no? Very good program. Then we offer the full risk and vulnerability assessment. The RVA is the vertical, the horizontal, and everything else. So it's an internal pen test, an external pen test, wireless war driving, phishing campaign. We're gonna get into your environment and show you how we did it. There's about an 18-month to 2-year waiting list for that particular service right now, though, because it is free. Well, I'm sorry, it's taxpayer funded. But I would love to talk to you more in detail about this, but I want to leave some time for questions here. But please, we can have an hour-long conversation. Just hit me up. We'll schedule a time. I'll get you involved with your local cybersecurity advisor. I want to say thank you for allowing me to talk to you today, and do we have any questions?